So for a number of times already, I made mention that this lesson is similar to the lesson that we had in research project. Again, the reason for that is this subject as and research project will share a common performance task. Fortunately, the concept of having a research instrument has also been elaborated in our research project subject. This time, we are just going to add in or highlight on some parts which were not probably found in the or mentioned in the discussion for the discussion that happened in research project. To start, let us look at the research instrument as something that is valid and reliable. What makes a research instrument valid? It is when it directly answers or addresses your research question. I mean, in simple terms, if the instrument is really meant for whatever research question it wants to address, if the research instrument manages to answer the research questions that the researcher formulated, then that research instrument is valid. It is also called reliable once it develops consistent and stable data. Remember your experimentations? The very reason why I asked you to do at least 3 trials or 3 setups is to develop a consistency of results, such that if the results turn out to be consistent across 3 setups or across 3 trials, then you can safely say that the experimental method you chose to employ works as a good method for your experiment. If it turns out that there is an inconsistency with the results, then that poses a reliability issue towards the researcher. So consistency and stability of data, reliable instrument. Instrument that answers directly answers or responds to the research question, that's a valid research instrument. There are 3 main types of research instruments. You have a survey, you have an experiment, and an observation. It might not have been labeled clearly there, but if you look at your module, there are the 3 types of instruments are the survey, the experiment, and the observation. Under a survey, you can do an interview or use a questionnaire. So those are the things that we have to consider. Again, 3 types of research instruments: survey, experiment, observation. Under a survey, you can do an interview or you can hand out questionnaires. Let's go back first to a survey. In a survey, there are 3 types of questions that can be used. You have a recall question, a recognition question, or an open-ended question. Recall questions are questions that basically ask for specific information like age, address, years of service in a particular area, people living with that person. For as long as it's a recall of a specific information about the person being interviewed, so you have there a recall question. Aside from a recall question, you have recognition questions. This is where the respondent recognizes an answer from a list of options. That's why it's recognition. The goal is to choose an answer from a list of options. Then you have the open-ended question where the respondent is given the chance to provide explanations and impressions towards the researcher's questions. How do we do interviews? As the first type of doing a survey, there are 4 stages. The interview begins with a pre-interview stage where the guide is prepared and respondents are identified and contacted. Please, it's important to note that participants will have to be contacted before the actual interview. My grade 11 students are doing qualitative research and most of their methods rely on the use of an interview. So I've reminded them several times already, I've reminded them, always contact your respondents ahead of time and ask for their permission. Never ambush a respondent because that violates the principles of ethics. It is really unethical to simply ambush a respondent and ask for that respondent to be part of an interview. Next to the pre-interview stage is the warm-up stage. It's the warm-up stage, just the term warm-up, that's like what the term warm-up denotes, is a conditioning stage. This is that part of the interview where the interviewee is made comfortable or at ease for the purpose of the interview that the interviewer is going to conduct. This is to lessen the tension or any feeling of nervousness the interviewee might actually feel. As weird as it sounds, yes, there, even if it's just for an interview where there's just a researcher and an interviewee, there are still others who might feel conscious or tense while they are being interviewed, especially that they'll be made aware that their responses are going to take part in a research. Thus, there's still a need to warm them up. Once the warm-up stage is done, we proceed with the main interview stage. So this is where the researcher points out the necessary questions found in the list or the questions that have been planned or crafted for the purpose of the interview. In relation to this, the researcher may, during the interview, the researcher may choose to take note of responses, or the researcher may request that the interview be recorded. In the event that a recording is going to be done for an interview, it is important that the permission of the respondent be granted to the researcher. Ask for a permission that the recording be done. Do not do not put the recording in secret. Do not make it appear as though you are already doing the interview, but then you are placing your phone or your recorder inside your pocket to secretly record the interview. In the context of professional research, the interviewee can actually sue the researcher if that's the case. Again, ask for permission if you wish to record the interview. Then comes the closing stage, where the participant will have to be thanked by the researcher for granting the time, for sparing some time for the purpose of an interview. Respondents will be acknowledged, and yes, most importantly, they'll be given credit or be thanked for the request has been granted by them. In some cases, interviewers would give some form of token to the interviewees. Token in the form of cash, in the form of gifts, or some items which they'll give or hand over to the participant. Then you have there the guidelines. Among all things, I'd like us to pinpoint a few. For instance, adjust your language to that of the respondent. When you do interview soon, because for sure, expect that this is not the only research that you'll do. When you proceed to college, especially like in your case, Majoy, no, you're in the humanities strand. If you take a humanities course in college, most probably you'll do researches where you are to involve yourself with the community, with the members of the community. If your course is really a social science course, if you choose an interview, Majoy, please expect that you might interview someone who don't have the same vocabulary or register of words as you do. That is why in so many cases, questionnaires for an interview or the interview guide themselves will have to be translated to another language. I mean, in my experience of doing the interview in the resettlement site in Panglao, I found that the questionnaire that we had has an English statement and a vernacular translation. Why did we prepare for the vernacular translation? It is to remind us that in case the respondent could not understand the question in English, there's always an available translation in the vernacular. This is not to undermine your respondent. It's not to doubt your respondent that they cannot really understand you. No, that's not our point. Our goal here is let us meet at a common level of understanding, much so that it will really avoid confusions from the part of our respondent. Imagine in an interview and then they cannot understand your question. They just might give a wrong answer. And giving a wrong answer for reasons that they did not understand the question invalidates the interview. So you might as well really understand the language of the interviewees. What if you turn out having an interview with the Bajau community? In the community of Joyce, look at the hair of Joyce. What did my students in HNU do last time? When they interviewed Bajau community in Tutulan, as their research project was on the health practices of the barangay. There was a chieftain, not necessarily a chieftain, like an elder in the Bajau community who went together with them. Because they cannot put the questionnaire in Bajau, in the dialect of the Bajaus, they requested that elder to do the translation for them. So it's like this. I'm the researcher. As let's assume that Lex is the elder and Majoy is the Bajau. So whenever I pointed, hello, this session is recorded. Disclaimer, whoever finds this session, and if you belong to that ethnic group, this is not to offend you or anything. This is merely for sample purposes. Whoever finds this video and belonging to any ethnic group, this is not to offend you or to seclude your minority. Huh? This is merely for sampling purposes. And the researcher, so what happened is, the question was raised, Lexineth translated it for Majoy. Majoy's response was still in the Bajau dialect. So when the Bajau, when Majoy gave the answer, Lexineth translated it to me in the vernacular. Because again, the answer in raw Bajau dialect is not understandable by me. So the elder helped me in translating it. So it was put in the language, the questionnaire was put in the language of the respondents. It's not necessarily on the translations, but just imagine if you're trying to study, if you're trying to do a study about illiterate people, like the means of survival of people with illiterate who belong to the illiterate group. What if, just what if, you were asked to do a research of that category? Of course, you will not use very difficult words in your research. You'll have to tone it down in a manner that's understandable to the group who belongs to the category. Again, at any rate, we should learn to adjust our language to that of our respondents. Now we proceed to the questionnaire. The questionnaire is surely unfamiliar to you. You made questionnaires last school year. How did you make your questionnaires? You had a column for the statements, you had a column for the available responses. There's a part of here which is located on the second page after experiment. There are parts of a questionnaire. The first part of a questionnaire is a personal information section, where this is where you ask the name, which is labeled as optional. The purpose of the word optional there is to at least give the participants, to the respondents, the feeling that their identity will be kept confidential or that the paper will be kept anonymous. But how will you keep track of who answered what paper? So the researchers will have to devise a way. Like for instance, you have Miguel, Nathan, and Majoy. As the word optional was found in the questionnaire, they chose not to place a name on their respective in the copy of the questionnaire. But as a researcher, you could of course provide a code that you probably will place a red mark on the test paper of Miguel, and then you place the meaning of the red mark when you create your legends later on. Red is for Miguel Apale. When it came to the questionnaire of Nathan Mamakos, you placed a different color. Blue is for Nathan Mamakos. That again, even if they didn't place their names, you could trace the identity of, or you could trace the answer to whosoever gave that response for the purpose merely of tracing. Next is your basic questions section. To establish if you're asking that the person you're asking is the right person for the study, and to establish rapport with the interviewees. Then you have the main question section. So the main question section is where you are giving the respondent the chance to probably tick or encircle an option from a list of choices. Sometimes there are also questionnaires who provide the open-ended question section, where respondents, like in an interview, are given the chance to provide a brief explanation or an impression to the research that's being done, or an impression towards the question found in the research. And then again, the good thing here is the use of an interview is not anymore new to you, especially that just from the last semester, you had the experience of crafting a research questionnaire and administering that research questionnaire to participants. Among all things, it's important to be reminded that research questionnaires are good to be subjected for a pilot test. Pilot testing the questionnaire will more or less try to validate that questionnaire, to see that the questionnaire really is directed to whatever is the goal of the research. You just might have placed there statements that have nothing to do with the study. Pilot testing will tell you to remove these items, to rephrase items to make them better, or to keep items which are already good and fitting for the purpose of the research. When we say that these items are good and fitting for the research, these are the statements that really match, these are the questions that really match the intentions of the paper. Another type of research instrument is the experiment, the one that you're doing now. Which reminds me, how are your experiments? According to Miguel earlier, before we started the call, Miguel will give to Benjamin a share of the nutrient solution so that Benjamin can do the experiment there in Lobo. What plant will you be experimenting with, Miguel?
I think I'll be experimenting with Alubati and Ivan will have
Will,
Pechay.
Ivan will have Petchai. Okay. Nathan and Nicole, how are your experimentations now?
One ba, sir? One pa. Measure. Tama pa ang method.
What do you mean by measure? You're playing, huh? Measure. Like, at what stage are you now, Nathan, with your experiment?
Kuha na, sir. Karon, day 4. What stage? Day 14 na karon.
How you sounded unsure? You're the ones doing you're doing the experiment. How can you be unsure of what day
Growing na,
you
sir,
are
ang kuhan.
already?
Plant growing na.
Growing. It just might grow as tall as the beanstalk, huh? In Jack and the Beanstalk. That's so progressive. Growing, still growing, sir. Majoy Raisa, what's the update regarding the experiment?
Ongoing, sir, and then we're going to measure our kanang differences kay every week. So every Monday we will have to check on our plan.
So
Pero we're
update. So the recording there, Rai, will be on an interval of 7 days, like that.
yeah,
So
kay
like,
we found it kay kung every day magod kay that's not much of a difference.
mm-mm.
Kay it's the picture is not going as fast as we expected it. So
That's
and
actually a
then
good suggestion to do the measurement of the plants on an interval of 7 days, like for week 1, week 2, week 3. So that's more or less the flow right now.
yes, sir.
For one month, for 4 weeks.
For 4 weeks because we have na kuan na the maturity age of a petchay is at 25 to 30 days. And yeah, the average
How did you know
quantity,
this maturity age of the Pechay, Rai?
it is shared by the Department of ito sa again man ito sa citation.
Um, it was cited in our conserve method.
See, look at that
Department
process that
of
Raisa and Joyce are doing.
Agriculture in Mimaropa.
That's good. Look at the process that Raisa and
Department of
Joyce are doing,
Agriculture
Hannah.
in Mimaropa.
They have decided to end it for the 4th week, or to reach the 4th week in the gathering of the data, because according to a particular citation, the maturity age of Pechay is at that particular number. Take note, it's not merely their instinct or not merely their choice to end it there, but it's supported by an authority somewhere telling them that it's good to end the experimentation up to this week, because that's tantamount to the maturity age of the plant. I hope the other groups can do the same. So to those who are doing the pet shy, like Miguel, you have the pet shy as well, no? So you can do the same number of days of observation for its growth. So there's already a citation that you can also get from the study of Raisa and Majoy. In the case of the Mung Bean, Lex and Crisel.
Mag-redo pa mi, sir.
Again, sorry.
Mag-redo mi pa.
Okay, you'll still redo it. And then,
Yes, sir.
what is the planned number of days for observation or gathering of the data?
10 days, good, sir.
10 days.
Nakita na nga koan. Yes, sir.
Do we have a literature already to support it?
Yes sir, pero wala giingon nga kuan pero way gigamit nila sir ba sa ilang research nga 10 days.
Is it a
Pero
published research?
yes sir.
Okay, it's all right, Lex. It's all right. That's fine. So in the case of Lex and Crisel, they'll use the number. They'll use 10 days only as the number of days of observation. As again, it's patterned from a citation. So they are not choosing the number of days blindly, nor are they simply following it through by instinct. It's not merely by each other's opinion, but they're taking it from as suggested or done by some other research, published research out there that puts their choice of the number of days acceptable or correct in the same way that Raisa and Joyce are doing it. So Nathan and Nicole, I hope you can do the same. What plant are you trying to experiment here? Nathan?
Pichay, sir.
Pechay.
Pichay.
Oh, so you have Pechay, the same as Raisa and Joyce. That's good. So 4 weeks, 1 month. If you manage to follow that schedule of 4 weeks or 1 month, November, yeah, you'll be done with the
This week.
experimentation on November.
Last week. Sige.
I just hope and pray, of course, that when you did your experiment, I know that I've mentioned this before. Allow me to just reiterate this because this is really important. Please control as many lurking variables as you can. Like the environment where the plants have been planted, the type of soil involved, the amount of the soil, the amount of water that has been used to water the plant, the size of the pot where the plants are planted. Control all of this. Be sure to have them, or else they might be the reasons why results come out. It just might create a wrong impression of the results. Minimizing that's also the goal of an experiment. Experiments as research instruments try to really minimize the effects of extraneous or lurking variables, because we are simply after of what our intervention can provide. What happens once we try to manipulate a variable? So lurking variables will have to be minimized. You have here the guidelines. Experiments may also deal with human beings. Do the pot sizes thing apply to us as well? Hydroponics. Oh, for hydroponics, of course, Miguel. Yours, Miguel, will be the amount of nutrient solution. So that's their hydroponic study has nothing to do with the pot size, because pot size is for the use of the soil. So it's about the amount of nutrient solution, that it has to be uniform. I mean, and the measurement must really be exact across all setups. When we do experiments, of course, so the water and the nutrients, yes. When we do experiments, we can of course make use of human beings. I know I've mentioned this in our research project subject. For the purpose of emphasis, human beings once used in an experiment should be treated with ethics, meaning we keep their identities confidential and anonymous. If it reaches the point where you take a picture of someone, so common practice, we blur the eyes, or like if the experimentation has something to do only with a facial cream and what happens to the skin on the cheeks, it's only that part that will be seen. Identity, but what's more important here, what's really important here is that identities of the participants are really protected. Ethics will have to be followed. Then we go to the third type of research instrument, and that's with an observation. An observation, this one has more specifics when it comes to the module here has more specifics when it comes to the types of observations. We can have a participant and a non-participant observation. A participant observation is where the researcher becomes a part of the entire group, while a non-participant observation is where the researcher is acting plainly as an observer. The researcher does not interact with the group that's being observed. The participant observation would require that the researcher talks, behaves together with the participants, converses, sits down with them, the researcher sends messages to them and receives messages from the participants of the observation. Really opposite from that of a non-participant observation. Observations can also be structured or unstructured. A structured observation already has a list of behaviors just waiting to be observed, while an unstructured observation does not rely on whatever is expected beforehand, but just waits for whatever comes out. So like if this is an unstructured observation, what I'll do is just to simply record all behaviors that I'm seeing from all of the students or from one student. Assuming that I'm going to observe, assuming that we are going to observe Nathan and Joyce when they see something like this. Majoy. Majoy. O, diba? We'll just have to take note of what their reactions are. Like the first reaction would be, there's a feeling of kilig that we can see in the face of Nathan. The smile of Joyce reaches her ears. I mean, she could barely take things in, like her smile. She's smiling all the time. So these are observations that we just have to take note of because we did not list down observations that we are already expecting for. We don't have a list of observations that we are wishing to right away see. We are just going to settle with whatever is shown to us. That makes it unstructured. Behaviors as they emerge. That's the better term. You also have a covert and an overt observation. The covert observation is a kind where the ones being observed are not aware that they have just been observed. Opposite is the overt observation, where the participants are already told that they will be observed. Last time in research project, I did tell you that there's a danger when it comes to an overt observation. So an observation where the participants are aware that they are being observed. The participants might just fake their behaviors. They just might do something that is not genuine or not really reflective of what their real behaviors are. Perhaps one possible reason is they don't want the researcher to think badly of them. Second possible reason, they want to please the researcher and that they be able to meet the expected behaviors the researcher wishes to see. So these will defeat then the real purpose of an authentic observation. Questions regarding preparing and implementing research instruments.
Sir, inig-observe sad sir, dapat di makaibaw. Like, di ba sa mag-record ka, for example,
Yes, yes, yes.
mag-record, is it okay nga di pahibawon day sir kay what if kaybaw sila nga record sila dain sa ilang movement or
These are the danger. For every choice of a research instrument, Lex, there are always drawbacks. So yes, there's a possibility that when they are really informed that they're being observed, when you are doing a recording like that of an interview, for instance, the interview, no, when you do the interview and then you are going to ask the participant, can we do this recorded so that I can transcribe the information later on so that we can just go smoothly with the interview. The participant might feel more conscious. In effect, the participant might not say everything because even something too personal will probably be captured by the recording. So that's a possibility. That's one possible drawback. However, if the participant wishes to say, no, this will not be this will not be a recorded interview, then that's also another thing. Probably that's where the comfort is of the participant. The participant could probably give more details, and then you will just have to oblige yourself as the researcher to really take note of whatever you can from the response of the participant. When you also do a covert interview, like for instance, you'll interview this class. I'm the researcher and I'll observe your class and that I must not inform you. What I can do is to inform the head of the class. Like for instance, the class advisor or the head of the school asking for permission that an observation be done to your class. Without necessarily informing each of you, hopefully not to influence each of your behaviors. So there's still a way to do it, and the
Okay, sir.
permission is still granted. Other questions? Other questions? Questions? If there is no more, if there is no more question, then there's no more question. It's grammatically incorrect. If there are no more questions, we can call it a day. Again, I'm just glad that this lesson is also close to the lesson that we had in research project. So please take note of the guidelines there on how to prepare the instrument, how to prepare the questionnaire, the interview, how to conduct an experiment, how to conduct an observation. Like, try to study them, go over them. I would not say that you should memorize them because it's really impractical. Why will you memorize all of these? What for? If there are no more questions, we can call it a day. Goodbye and thank you, grade 12.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.
And
Goodbye
thank
and
you.
thank you,
Sir.
Sir Sim.